Hello, I recently came across a new product online which I was very intrigued about, called Delaminating Inks by the company Kamenskaya. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing the company name right. I've looked it up and it's been pronounced a couple of different ways. But I was very cheeky and I contacted the company and asked them if they would like me to show these delaminating inks on my YouTube channel. And they were kind enough to send me a box of them. And they let me choose the colours. So I've chosen seascapey colours, and you'll see why in a minute. So the thing that attracted me to these were that it seemed like they were alcohol inks, but which granulate. And if you've been around my channel much, you might have picked up that I really love granulating watercolours. So I was very excited to see this product, and also to see that they were called Lightfast. I'll talk about alcohol inks for a minute, just to give these some kind of context. So I've worked with alcohol inks quite a bit in the past, mainly for doing seascapes, like this kind of thing. And I've used a mixture of Tim Holtz Ranger alcohol inks and also Jackson's Own. And I've liked both of these. I believe that alcohol inks are dye-based though, and so they're prone to fading. I've always treated mine in the past with coats and coats of UV protective spray. So this is one alcohol ink painting I did, and you can see that it creates very smooth washes. You can add texture, so I put these drops in by dropping isopropyl alcohol on. And as you move the inks around, you can obviously get more concentrated areas of ink at the borders. But the washes themselves are very smooth. So the thing I liked about the delaminating inks were that the washes weren't smooth, they were kind of very granulating-y. So I'm very excited to have a play with these in a minute. If you can hear taps in the background, it's rain. It's a really dull, horrible day today, and that's the rain on my windowsill. So like alcohol inks, it says that the delaminating inks are best used on a waterproof background. So I've got this Yupo paper. This is a thinner version, so quite smooth matte paper. It's just a couple of different sizes. And then I've got this thicker sheeting. This is called Craft Plastic by the company Grafix. And I really love this stuff for alcohol inks because whereas the Yupo paper stains, this stuff, you can wipe it back completely to white. So I'll do some experiments today on both. So the delaminating inks come in 40 different colours, and they are really nice colours. As I said, they're Lightfast, and it says that the ink splits into particles. So one of the inks has got this little instruction booklet with it. The company don't just produce these inks, they also do all sorts of other things: alcohol inks, acrylic inks, modelling materials. So take a look at the website because there's a ton of interesting stuff on there. So shake the bottle, turn the cap to open, and mix the ink in a ratio of 2:1. So 2 parts alcohol, 1 part ink, and then pour the mixed liquid onto a smooth surface. Yeah, so this collection features a delaminating effect where pigments flow, separate and settle to create stunning depth and texture. So it says that you allow the alcohol to evaporate naturally to reveal the delaminating effect. When I've used alcohol inks, depending on what effect I want, I either use a heat tool to move the ink around the surface, or from my Copic marker days, I've got an air blower. This is attached to a little compressor unit, and you would put the Copic pens in there and you could Let me turn it on. When you press this button, air blows out this nozzle here, and you get an airbrush effect from your Copic pens. But I use this just for the air, just for a cold air source, because the ink takes longer to dry that way, so you get different effects. So although it says you don't need to use those with this ink, I'd still like to experiment with them. So yeah, there are 40 shades. They come in a few different sets of 8 for 50 or 60 pounds, or they're £8 each. So I'm super grateful to Kamenskaya for sending me these for free. So those are the colours which I picked out, and I want to try kind of doing an aerial, like seascape. So I might also use some white alcohol ink, and then possibly I've got these two metallics. So you can see in this painting here, I dropped in some of the gold, and there's this one as well. I was working on a logo for a friend's company. It also says that once these dry, the pigments can come off the surface, so you need to use a spray acrylic varnish on top of them. These are the varnishes that I've used in the past with alcohol inks. The Kmar varnish to seal them in and protect them from the UV coating. And then for any prolonged use with isopropyl alcohol, I use my respirator. I won't stick that on straight away today. I'll just have a little play around with these first so I can talk them through. But this is what I use. This is just stuff that I bought from Amazon. It's 99.9% isopropyl alcohol. And I decant it into these little squirty bottles. I don't know if these are sauce bottles. I'll link to everything down below anyway. But just to show you what I've got to hand outside of the shot. I know how incredibly messy I am with alcohol inks, so I've got out a glass board to work on, and I'm going to use some gloves. So I've just shaken this one up. This is Storm. Actually, I wonder if there are seals inside. Yeah. Oops. Oh, I'm supposed to mix them with the isopropyl alcohol. I'll just have to mix this one on here. So I can see the granulation happening already. There's obviously some like very heavy pigment in there. I've got to have the light on, I'm afraid, today because it's so dull. So hopefully that's not causing too many really bad reflections. Let me show you this close up, because it's already doing some really fun, interesting texture. I've just grabbed out some little tubs that I use with acrylic paints, so I'll use these for mixing them up first. So this is Toad, nice olivey green. the seal has kind of already come off the cap tops, so I'm just using a pencil to peek them out of the lid. This is Sea Wave. And let's go for a lighter one. Now this one looks more opaque, or maybe there's some like white. And then I'm going to tip in some of this iridescent silver from Jackson's. The Kamenskaya website does do some metallics as well. So I think I'll use the air tool now just to move these around a little bit and spread them out a bit. And this is matcha, which, look, I've not shaken it well enough. You can see there's some white at the bottom there. All right, that's mixing in a bit better now. I was going to say this looks like a more pastel-y one again. Oh, I forgot to mix it with the alcohol. So on the website, it talks about moving the inks just by tilting the paper. But I guess it's going to work both ways. This is still a little bit thick down here. It's so nice seeing how the different ones interact with each other. So here I've got a more transparent one, the darker one, flowing through into the more opaque, paler one. On the website you can also purchase courses on how to do these properly. I'm going to leave this one now and move on to another one. I think possibly I've used a little bit too much, especially in these more opaque ones that have got white in them. But I'll put this one aside and let it dry completely, and I'll have a play with another one now. So I've prepared all of my tubs now with the diluted ink in the 8 colours that I've got. I had a bit of an accident with the sand colour one. So I'm assuming it'll clear up in the same way that alcohol inks do. Yeah, that's great. So this is the Grafix craft plastic that I'm working on now. And now I'm going to work on something similar to what I used to do with alcohol inks, where I've got a beach layer here, and then a kind of a surf layer, and then going through turquoises to darker blues where the water gets deeper. So I'm going to see if I can achieve roughly something like that. So here's my sand layer going down. Then I'm going to use some white and silver for the surf. And this is just bright white Jackson's alcohol ink. So what I'm going to do is just put all of the ink in place and then move it around a little bit. And then I'm putting some gold in just for extra interest in the sea. And a little bit in the sand as well. It's so interesting looking at what they're doing already. Try and move down a bit closer, I don't pick it up. Sorry, you've got the reflection from my light there. I think this time I'm going to have a go with the heat gun and just see what happens. It feels like the laminating inks are in a slower drying medium than my regular alcohol inks. The alcohol evaporates off really quickly from my alcohol inks, and so I've got less time than this to work with. So some of these areas here are starting to dry, and yeah, there's not as much of the delamination and kind of granulation. So I guess that's the danger of the heat tool, is that you get less granulation. But I do like being able to move it around and speed up the drying a little bit. Another thing I like doing is kind of doing a bit of splatter with alcohol ink to make some drip patterns. So I'm just going to use this fan brush, put some isopropyl in there. Just put a couple of drips in there. This is so much fun experimenting with a new medium, oh my word. Break up some of this big gold band here. Break up this white a little bit. I just want to break that big gold clump there up. So I quite like what I've got here, so I'm going to set this one aside now. With the big sheets of Grafix craft plastic, I buy the size that's about 12 inches by 24 inches, and then I cut it down with a guillotine. So I get roughly 2 A4 sized sheets out of it, and then a little bit here. And I always play around with the end bits and make cards out of them. So yeah, I'll just have a smaller play here. I'm going to try for a more watery look this time and get quite a bit of isopropyl alcohol on my sheet first of all. I'll go through all the colours again. So let me get these right. So this darkest one I think is the Storm. And then this one's Sea Wave. Kind of darker turquoise. And there's this brighter blue, which is called Bicol. Then Maldives. Kind of a cerulean blue. And then we've got Bali. Then the matcha, very opaque green. Put a little bit less of that on. And we've got the Toad. There's some other really nice greens from the range as well. I can see myself buying a few more colours, definitely. And then the Sand. Whoops. Yeah, so when you tilt the paper, obviously I've put a lot of alcohol ink on there just to experiment. I'm just going to try some more of this white alcohol ink. There is a white delaminating ink as well, which I think would be pretty interesting to try out. Make some waves in there. Yeah, let's add some silver in. And a tinsy bit of green, a tinsy bit of gold. Oops. So that's been drying for a couple of minutes, and I think I can see that one of the dangers of putting so much isopropyl alcohol down at the beginning is that I get flows of it, and because I'm working on the graphics paper, which can wash completely clean again, I'm getting areas where there's not much ink. And you can experiment and play with this forever, I think. This is so much fun. I don't like having too big a clumps of the metallics. I like it where it looks more like a seam running through, like a rock or something, or along the length of a wave. So I'm going to go away and let these dry completely now, and I'll check back in later and tell you how long they took to dry. Though obviously that's going to vary with how much alcohol you've added and all that kind of stuff. And I might frame these up and show you the finished products. Before I do that, I'll just show you the progress on the first one. So this is where I'd poured down the ink without diluting it. First of all, it's still very dense there. You get these amazing tracks. It just reminds me of aerial photography, of, I don't know, like river deltas or water. I'm going to add a bit more alcohol to this corner just to give it a chance to delaminate a bit again, because the ink was too thick. And here's the more intentionally seascapey one. Some areas are dry now, but not all. It's a couple of days later and the painting's dried, and then I framed them. I'd say that they'd all dried completely within about an hour or so. This was the long skinny one, which I've cut down. You can see how the gold's spread through it. I think this was one where I used quite a lot of alcohol down on the surface first, so the colours aren't quite as intense. And then this was the first one that I did, where I'd put quite a lot of the ink down. And you definitely get much more of the kind of striation pattern. And this one had not quite so much metallic in, it had a bit of the silver. I'll try and show you, but I'm just getting my window reflection. This whole swathe here is metallic really. But I think this kind of pattern here is absolutely beautiful. I think it's exactly what I was hoping for when I first saw the product. I went for a very, very wet walk yesterday, and I had to take this photo of the mud with the rain running through it because it reminded me of the Delaminating Inks. And then this is the one which is more similar to my previous alcohol ink paintings. So this has got quite bold gold in it, plus some of the silver along the shoreline. And then these are the ones I did on Yupo paper, and they didn't turn out as well, but I think that might be because they were smaller, and because I got quite a lot of liquid on, all the colours merged more because there was kind of a lot of liquid in a smaller space. They're still quite pretty up close. This one was a bit of a mess. I'd got a load of extra ink just lying on my glass cutting pad, and I'd turned it over and just picked up all the rest. I did frame one of the Yupo ones. This frame, the shape of the frame, reminds me of the windows of the old tin mines in my village. And there's one where you look through the window that's this shape and you look out to sea. And I just thought that was quite fun to represent that. So this Yupo one worked out better, but I didn't get any of the striation. This looks more like traditional alcohol ink rather than the new ones. But I am delighted that they are colour fast. One thing which I mentioned earlier was that they need to be sprayed with acrylic varnish, and I think that's definitely the case. If I show you, I mean, some of that's the metallic, not the ink. Let me choose a bit where it's just ink. It doesn't come off quite so much, but it does still transfer. So if I want to use them as greetings cards, or where the surface isn't covered, then you definitely need to spray them with varnish. I'd put my leftover ink and alcohol mixture into these tubs, and you can see that the alcohol in them all evaporates, but you can just refresh them by adding in more alcohol, and they reconstitute nicely. So I hope that was a good introduction to these delaminating inks from Kamenskaya. If you're used to alcohol inks, then these take it to the next level. They are pretty messy and staining, like even with wearing gloves, my nails haven't recovered yet. But they are absolutely great fun and I'm delighted with them. As I said, please go and check out Kamenskaya's website because there's loads of interesting stuff on there. And I'll link to everything that I've used down below in the description box. Thanks ever so much for joining me. Bye!